that would be swell. He's in the chat. Let's see how it goes. So we're starting the broadcast now. So hi, peoples. This is the Narrative Lectionary 144. Joshua renews the covenant, preached on for most of us the weekend of October 12th. So there's three of us that are actively engaged. One other is sitting there somewhat in stasis. And if you'd like to join us, we post weekly on the Narrative Lectionary page on Facebook, and you can click the link and hopefully follow the directions and join us for this. All right.
Every Wednesday at 10.
Every Wednesday at 10. All right. Anybody want to read the lesson?
I got it.
Okay.
From Joshua 24. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your ancestors Terah and his sons Abraham and Nahor lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in its midst, and afterwards I brought you out. When I brought your ancestors out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your ancestors with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. When they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians and made the sea come upon them and cover them, and your eyes saw what I did to Egypt. Afterwards you lived in the wilderness for a long time. Then I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I handed them over to you. You took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab, set out to fight against Israel. He sent and invited Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore he blessed you, so I rescued you out of his hand. When you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, the citizens of Jericho fought against you, and also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivtites, the Jebusites, and I handed them over to you. I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove out before you the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and towns that you had not built, and you live in them. You eat the fruit of the vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. Now therefore revere the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And that's the end of the actual lection, but we are going to go on to verse 18, which continues, "Then the people answered, Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord and serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery, and who did these great signs in our sight. He protected us all along the way that we went, and among the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God."
Yay!
So the question is, who are we having lecturing at these services this weekend, and do they know this is coming at them?
If they open the email, they do. Someone put that on the Narrative Lectionary Facebook page. They were saying, has anyone edited the reading to take out all the names? Because you will get lost. You can get lost in all those names. Ralph Klein always used to joke when he would list all the peoples of the Promised Land. He'd be like, the Jebusites and the Perizzites and the Amorites and the mosquito bites and the, and you just throw in things like that. Because you can't tell what any of that means, It gets bogged down. But
it does, but isn't that kind of the point?
Yeah. No, I think so, right? I mean, this is actually someone else's land, and you have it now, right? I mean, like, that's part of it. In this sort of sweep of the fact that the people of Israel do nothing, and God is the one who's always delivering them, emphasizing that this is, vineyards you did not plant and cities you did not build is important.
Well, and I guess partly I view it as similar to the genealogies, where each name is another example of God's faithfulness. In this case, one more enemy that God dealt with. In the genealogy cases, one more.
Oh no!
Sorry about that.
Am I doing that?
No, I think it's either Bill or Skynet is being activated.
I think that's me, Bill.
Hey, Bill!
Hey.
Yay, I can hear you, I just can't talk or anything.
Well, you are talking now.
Oh, good. Well, it can just be my frozen face that talks.
That's fair.
All right.
We'll start from there and we'll go on.
Okay, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Sounds good, though. All right, where were we?
The list of conquered peoples is like a genealogy. Go, Gene.
Well, I was also thinking back to we use Rich Melheim's stuff, Fink stuff, and in the First Communion class, one of the things they bring up is the question, do you know any Amalekites? Do you know any Hittites? Do you carpool with the Jebusite? No, all these other peoples have disappeared. And at that point, the reason it's brought up is to make the point that to the extent that the Jews have kept the Passover has kept the Jews. But to the extent that they've continued to tell it as their story, and they tell it in the first person, that story has kept them who they are. The idea that if you don't tell your story, it's not your past that you lose; it's your future that you lose. We've had over and over again here early in the fall lectionary meetings these opportunities or just designated for us, like in this case, opportunities to retell the story and retell the story and retell the story. And on the one hand, it kind of starts to get old, but on the other hand, there's, I think, some really important reasons that our tradition has done that over and over and over again.
Well, even in this lesson, there's that line where, and we know historically, they wandered in the desert until the generation died. It says, your ancestors brought you out of Egypt, talk about ancestors, and then there's this line, and your eyes saw what I did in Egypt.
Right. None of these people's eyes saw what God did in Egypt. Right? That your eyes refers to the collective people going back through time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the generation that goes into the promised land. The generation before them all died in the wilderness.
But that's not how they see it. Gene is right. Gene is right. The Jews today see that God saved them from slavery.
Absolutely.
This isn't something that happened to somebody else. This is something that happened to them. So when they said, remember how God rescued you out of slavery, they're not thinking, oh yeah, that's my great-great-great-great-grandfather.
Right.
They're thinking, that's me. That's me. I was rescued.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm sorry if I sounded like I was being adversarial.
No. I was just saying that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's really that point is there's that whole idea of witness. And
Well,
as
and
people
we don't think like
this
that.
to the ongoingness, you are part of this large story. This is your story. You too have seen what God has done with your own eyes through the essence of who you are, this deliverance from slavery into freedom.
So my question, and the reason I brought it up, is do people actually think like, do our people think like that? The people to whom we are preaching. Will that make sense in their minds? Because if mine eyes have not seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, then I don't, and I don't know, I think it's a perspective we don't have, which is a shame.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not a perspective that we have. We study the first century to get a glimpse of what the New Testament writers were thinking, rather than thinking that they're talking to me. We always think, whoa, what's the original audience that they're talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would that make a difference in the preaching of this text then?
I personally, I hear this as being more of renewal of a promise. So it's just like when you renew your wedding vows, you usually say, oh, we've been together, blah, 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 and we've seen this happen and that happen, and we've gone through this and gone through that, and then the renewal of the promise. That's the same sort of thing, as it's Israel recalling their history with God and their history of their relationship with God, and then at the very end saying, and we're going to go forward, and we're going to go and serve God now. I think that preaches really well, actually, because we have a lot of promises in our day promises that we need renewing and refulfilling.
I don't know if we're great at renewing.
Sure.
I think that might be an equally foreign concept. Fool me once, shame on you type of thing, right? But I won't let it happen again. Why should this group of people get to claim the promise when all of these people have been so bad on the promise? I mean, obviously the reason they claim the promise is because of who God is, not who they are, right? But
Right.
it makes about as much sense that these people should be included in the covenant as it does for us to imagine ourselves, as those people, because that doesn't, again, it's not a point of view that makes sense to us. And, once, oh man, if I ever talk to one more person that says, well, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget, I mean, it's that kind of attitude that is so pervasive, is it not? I mean, renewing promises isn't something we're terribly good at.
It's ironic that the Jews in our area just finished celebrating Yom Kippur, and that's exactly what they did, was they renewed the promise. And they do it every single year. They always renew the covenant, and they always remove the promise that they have, and then they move forward from there. And it's a yearly thing. It's not something that they go, oh my gosh, I've got to do it again. No, no, no. They look forward to it. These are high holy days. So I think it's interesting that we bulk at that while they just completely embrace it.
Yeah. Well, on some levels, we do embrace it a little bit as Lutherans. I mean, we have this idea of dying daily, and rising again in our baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like I said, it's something we should embrace, but I don't know if it's something that people do. I mean, I think that's where it preaches.
Mm-hmm.
To say that this is the case.
Yeah.
This promise is renewed. It is renewed in your hearing right now.
Yeah. Going back to the idea we've been doing the stewardship stuff, and this idea of the promise of blessing, and part of that is going back to that is that you get to claim this blessing. This is something that is offered to you. That blessing remains there, is renewed for you on a regular basis. It is, again, for you to be overly Lutheran. but I think that's a big step, is to say this is for you. This is for you to renew. This is new for you every day, morning by morning. Yes.
All I have needed. Oh, sorry. Great is thy faithfulness. Yeah, no, and I think that is true, and to and then that's why I was so adamant about including verses 16, 17, 18, right? Because otherwise you end with Joshua going, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, scumbags," and right in 16, 17, 18, you get the people saying, "Yeah, no, we want to serve God." Right? I cut out the rest about Joshua going, "Well, you're just witnesses against yourself because you're going to screw this up." Of course they're going to screw it up. Of course we screw it up. But the promise is renewed, and the promise is renewed, and the promise is renewed. And that's the point. So that's, I mean, like I said, that's why I really wanted to include those verses. Because otherwise, it is just Joshua who renews the covenant. Right?
No, it's not.
No.
Go on.
No, it's Joshua.
If you stop at 15, it's more than just Joshua.
It is Joshua who has made the statement at that point, I am renewing this covenant, and then it's left open. Who else?
Right. That's why I said, that's why I want to include
it. And if you don't, if you leave those three verses off, what you do is you leave it open for people to answer for themselves. It functions a little bit like the end of the Gospel of Mark, where it's like, well, nobody said anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then how do we have the story? Right? So it puts the listener in the perspective of, well, there isn't no one else has answered. Someone should probably have an answer to this.
I can see that. I mean, if that's the way you're going to preach it, absolutely, right?
So I might refer to those. I might refer to that section of the text, but I don't think we'll have it read because I'd rather leave that hanging. So what are you going to do? Who do you say that I am? Right?
Yeah.
So
no, I go ahead.
So my question then becomes, how do we give those who hear this and hear us the best opportunity to respond faithfully?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to let people renew their vows to their spouses, to their children, to their community, to their God, in a congregational way, so that in the middle of the sermon to say, let's stand up and renew our commitment to our country. Let's stand up and renew our commitment to our spouses. Let's stand up and renew our commitment to our children. Let's stand up and renew our commitment to God. To do that in a way that doesn't call anybody out, but basically says, let's do it together, because that's what Joshua does. Joshua involves the entire. I mean, he doesn't go up to individual Israelites and go, "Who are you going to serve? Who are you going to serve? Who are you going to serve?" This is addressed to the community. This is addressed to the nation of Israel. So I think we've got to not make it so individual as involve the community in that. And how would our congregations, where do they need to recommit themselves to God? Where do they as a congregation need to do this work?
And that is all grounded in the fact that God is the one who makes this covenant, and God is the one upon whom the covenant is dependent, because with God, right, we can always renew that promise, and we always do, and it is renewed in your hearing in word and sacrament and all of that stuff. And it isn't dependent on us, because again, I mean, these Israelites don't go very far in the book of Judges before they turn to other gods and do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. And isn't that the story of our lives? That we are able to renew this.
God renews his covenant too, though, over and over and over again.
Yes.
Every time in the book of Judges that they repent, that they change their ways, God renews his covenant and sends a judge. So it's like it's almost like this back and forthness going on here. It's very much, I think, like a marriage.
I agree. That's a great metaphor.
Because as one person, in a marriage, not both of them aren't out of love at the same time, but often in a marriage, one person has to renew their vows a little more than the other one does, and it goes back and forth. And I think that's kind of what you see from, and I like connecting this with the book of Judges. I think that's a good idea, because then you see how this covenant has to be renewed over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I crashed there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Good.
You were receiving a direct message from God, I assume, which is what kicked you offline with us.
No, I was multitasking, and I was preparing the bulletin cover for this week, and I ran out of system memory.
All right.
So it'll be very interesting.
You have to choose at this moment who you will serve.
Yes.
Bulletin.
The text study.
Google, I guess. Yes, it's all right. Just one quick thing that I don't know if you guys got off on this or you're done with where you're going either, but there was an idea that just out of curiosity, I sent the Hornet before you. The Green Hornet?
It would be much better if it was the Green Hornet.
I am. What's that?
I said, so where are you going with that?
I have no idea. I sent the Hornet before you. It's not something that makes a lot of logical sense to me. So I'm like, is this another unicorn thing, or?
Well, I mean, my knowledge of the book of Joshua being that I read it once and don't remember much of it, is there a part where God sends bees?
Well,
I just assumed that was in there when it said I sent the Hornet before you.
I think the point is that last sentence, you did not do it with your own sword and bow.
Right.
That's the whole point, is that somebody went before you, and I sent the Hornet. I don't know how literally I think we should be taking that, but I think that the point is that you didn't do this. I stirred up the mess. I rocked the boat. I sent the Hornet, and it's not your sword and bow that did the work.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the important part. I mean, and that's been the case in these narrative readings, all the way back to the Red Sea, right? I mean, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of your God. Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Well, it goes back to the guy does it. I just pulled it up because I thought I sent the Hornet before you sounded just completely awesome. Not that it'll preach, but I just thought it was completely awesome. So.
But it actually might preach.
Yeah.
I hadn't gone back to look up that section before.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "I will send my terror ahead of you." This is from Exodus 23. "I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. I will send hornets ahead of you so that they will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites before you. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you.
Mm-hmm.
I will drive them out before you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land." So apparently the reason God sent hornets was to drive the people off a little bit, and then a little
Slowly.
bit more, and a little bit more as the swarms moved around. Which shows a different way of God providing for them. I mean, God's not just, oh, yep, here's the land, good luck.
Yeah, it wasn't just this kind of, oomph, you know, blitzkrieg, pardon the comparison there, but it was a planned, maybe more natural way.
The hornet is in the details, I guess.
It often is.